You ever get punched by life and then watch the same person who left you beg for a bandage? That's what happened to me. He left for a woman with money, a woman who had it all. And when her entire world crashed and burned around her, taking him down with it, suddenly he was on his knees, on my doorstep, asking to come home. He left, she had everything, she lost it. Then he came back. Stick around. I'm not here to be anybody's doormat. You're going to see exactly how I handled it, and why sometimes the sweetest revenge is just walking away and locking the door behind you. He asked me to take him back, and that's when I decided to teach a lesson. So let me ask you, if someone left you for money, would you take them back? Let me know in the comments, because I really want to know. Before the storm, there was the quiet. The kind of comfortable, worn-in quiet that you mistake for permanence. Our life wasn't a movie. It was a collection of small, unassuming moments that, when stitched together, formed the quilt I'd wrapped myself in for 10 years. There was me, Sarah. I'm a planner, a list maker, the kind of person who finds comfort in routine. And there was him, my husband, Mark. Mark was the opposite. He was charisma in a bottle, a firework looking for a sky. He was restless, always chasing the next big thing, the next exciting venture that was just around the corner. I thought my steadiness grounded him. I learned later that he just saw it as an anchor. Then there was Victoria. I didn't know her then, not really. She was just a name he'd mention, a networking contact, the CEO of some flashy tech startup. She was everything he was drawn to, polished, successful, and dripping with the kind of effortless wealth that made our comfortable life feel small. And of course, there was my best friend, Chloe. She's my rock, the one person who can see through my carefully constructed walls with a single glance. She was the first one to feel the tremor, long before I was willing to admit the ground was shaking. Our life was built on rituals. Saturday mornings were sacred. The smell of coffee Mark would brew, always a dark roast, the way I liked it, mingling with the scent of old books from the shelf. He'd read the business section of the paper, I'd be curled up on the couch with a novel, our feet tangled together under a worn fleece blanket. He'd reach over without looking up from his paper and run his thumb over my ankle. It was a language we spoke without words, a simple touch that said, "I'm here. We're here." I remember one Tuesday night, I was exhausted from work, just a complete wreck. I came home to find he'd ordered my favorite Thai food, the spicy basil chicken I loved, and had rented some dumb action movie he knew I had a secret soft spot for. We ate out of the cartons on the living room floor, and he made me laugh so hard that takeout noodles almost came out of my nose. He looked at me, his eyes crinkling at the corners, and said, This is my favorite thing." I loved him like a hometown diner loves its regulars. It wasn't about the thrill. It was about the profound comfort of knowing exactly what you were getting. The reliable warmth, the familiar taste, the feeling of being known. It was a steady, unassuming love, and I thought it was bulletproof. I thought our foundation was made of stone. Turns out, it was just sand, and the tide was already coming in. The first crack appeared on a Thursday. It was small, almost invisible. He'd left his laptop open on the kitchen island, which wasn't unusual. But as I walked by to put my mug in the sink, an email notification popped up on the screen. It was from a high-end jewelry store, a confirmation for an order. I frowned. My birthday was months away. Our anniversary had just passed. Curiosity got the better of me. I told myself it was fine, that he was probably just getting a watch repaired. I clicked it open. It was a receipt. 4 pair of diamond earrings. Not just any earrings, they were delicate, expensive, and definitely not my style. My heart started to beat a little faster. I scrolled down, looking for the shipping address. It wasn't our house. It was a P.O. box I didn't recognize. And then I saw the gift message. My blood went cold. For V, for new beginnings. M. V. Victoria. I closed the laptop so fast, the screen clicked shut. My hand was trembling. I stood there in the quiet of our kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening. My first instinct was to deny it. It's for his mother, Veronica. It's a business gift. The lies came easily, a desperate attempt to patch the hole that had just been blown through the whole of my life. But my gut knew. It was a cold, hard knot in my stomach that told me this was something more. I took a deep breath, walked away from the laptop, and said nothing. I chose to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't seen it, hoping that if I didn't acknowledge the monster under the bed, it would just go away. Have you ever ignored a gut feeling until it was too late? That one little email was a whisper, and I chose to cover my ears. Soon, the whisper would become a scream. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in gaslighting, both his and my own. The quiet comfort of our home was replaced by low, humming tension. It was in the air, thick and suffocating, like the stillness before a thunderstorm. The unraveling didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, methodical process, like a single thread being pulled from a tapestry until the entire picture began to distort. It started with his phone. It had always been just a device, left on the counter or the nightstand. Suddenly, it was an extension of his hand, always screen down, always with him. It would buzz late at night, and when I'd stir, he'd mutter, "Work, sorry babe." He started having late meetings and networking dinners that stretched past midnight. I remember one night, he came home just after 1 a.m., smelling faintly of expensive perfume, not my perfume, and whiskey. I was waiting up for him, pretending to read on the couch. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Long night?" "You wouldn't believe it," he said, unbuttoning his shirt, avoiding my eyes. "This new investor is a real talker. Had to close the deal." "Oh? What's his name?" I asked. A test. He hesitated for just a second. Robert? From the coast." There was no Robert. I knew because I'd overheard him on the phone earlier that week, talking to someone, his voice low and intimate. He had said, "I know, V. I'll be there as soon as I can, I promise." He started to drift. It wasn't the work of a cartoon villain, twirling his mustache as he plotted my demise. It was more complicated, more insidious. It was the slow corrosion of boredom, the allure of a shinier, more exciting life that Victoria represented. He started criticizing our home, our friends, our life. "Don't you ever want more, Sarah?" he'd ask, gesturing vaguely around our cozy living room. "Don't you feel stuck?" I didn't. I felt happy. But he was projecting. He was the one who felt stuck, and he was making me the cage. His vanity spiked. New, expensive clothes started appearing in his closet. He rejoined the fancy gym downtown, the one with the rooftop pool. He was curating a new version of himself, a version that no longer fit with me. The distance between us grew from inches to miles, even when we were sitting on the same couch. Our inside jokes fell flat. Our easy silence became a heavy, awkward void. I was losing him piece by piece, and the worst part was, he was letting me. The turning point came on a rainy Friday night. He told me he was going out with friends from work, a dies night. I knew he was lying. The knot in my stomach was back, tighter than ever. Chloe had been telling me for weeks to stop being a bystander in my own life. "Find out, Sarah," she'd urged. "For your own sanity, the not knowing is what's killing you." So I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened the Find My Friends app on my phone. We'd set it up years ago for safety, a silly little precaution we never used. Now it felt like a weapon. I watched his little blue dot move across the city, not towards the sports bar where his friends were, but towards the most expensive, exclusive hotel in the downtown core, the Grand View. My hands were shaking, but I got in my car. I didn't have a plan, I just needed to see, to know. I parked across the street, the rain blurring my windshield like tears. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my heart pounding against my ribs. And then I saw them. They weren't sneaking around. They walked out of the hotel lobby, hand in hand, laughing. Mark was looking at her, at Victoria, with a light in his eyes I hadn't seen in years, a light that used to be reserved for me. She was stunning, of course. Tall, blonde, wearing a tailored white coat that probably cost more than our mortgage payment. He opened the door of a sleek black sports car for her, leaning in to kiss her before he walked around to the driver's side. It wasn't a furtive, guilty kiss. It was long, possessive, and public. It was a statement. I didn't storm over, I didn't scream or cause a scene. I just watched until the car's red taillights disappeared into the rain. A strange, cold calm washed over me. The pain was so immense, it was almost silent. It was the quiet devastation of a city after the bomb has already dropped. I drove home, went inside, and sat on our bed in the dark. He came home 2 hours later, humming. He was practically glowing. He saw me sitting there and his smile faded slightly. "Hey, you're still up," he said, his tone a little too bright. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. I let the silence hang in the air, let it press down on him. "What's wrong?" he asked, his feigned innocence starting to crack. "How was your guys' night?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. He shifted his weight. "It was good. Fun, you know?" "No, I don't know, Mark, so why don't you tell me? Or should I just guess? Did it by any chance involve a 5-star hotel and a blonde in a white coat?" The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The easy charisma, the smooth excuses, they all evaporated. He just stood there, caught. For a moment, I saw a flash of panic, of regret, but it was quickly replaced by something else. Resignation. And then relief. He took a deep breath, and the words he said next shattered the last remaining pieces of my world. "I'm glad you know," he said, his voice steady. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah. I can't pretend. It's over between us. I want out." He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just ended it. Like he was closing a chapter in a book he was tired of reading. My entire world, our entire life, reduced to a single cold declaration. So let me ask you this. In that moment of discovery, would you confront them on the spot? Or would you wait, gather your thoughts, and plan your next move? I acted on pure instinct, and his reaction told me everything I needed to know. After he dropped that bomb, things moved with a horrifying speed. Mark packed a bag that night and left. He didn't go to a friend's house or a hotel. He went straight to her, straight to Victoria's gleaming high-rise penthouse, a palace in the sky that represented everything he'd been craving. I spent the next few months in a daze, functioning on autopilot. I went to work, I paid the bills, I met Chloe for coffee where I mostly just stared into my cup while she filled the silence. In the public narrative Mark was spinning for our friends, I was the one who couldn't keep up, who was holding him back from his true potential. And Victoria was his savior, the brilliant, dynamic woman who truly understood him. Her life was a spectacle, played out on social media and in business magazines. I couldn't help but look. It was like picking at a scab. I'd scroll through her Instagram, my stomach twisting with a toxic cocktail of rage and inadequacy. There they were, clinking champagne glasses on a private jet, attending a gala in Paris, Him in a perfectly tailored suit, beaming at her side. She was a tech mogul, the founder of a revolutionary financial app called Elysian that promised to democratize investing. She was on every 30 under 30 list, lauded as a visionary, a genius. To me, she was just the woman sleeping in my husband's bed. My tone when I thought about them was purely skeptical. I knew Mark, and I knew his ambition was always bigger than his ethics. This perfect life felt hollow, built on something flimsy. The first hint of trouble was a whisper online. A disgruntled former employee posted a long, rambling blog post accusing Elysian of being a house of cards. It was quickly dismissed as sour grapes, but it planted a seed. Then, a reputable financial journalist started asking questions. Small articles appeared tucked away in the business section, questioning Elysian's astronomical valuation and its opaque accounting practices. Mark, when I had to see him to exchange some paperwork, scoffed at it. "They're just jealous of her success, Sarah. You wouldn't understand. This is how the big leagues work." He was condescending, arrogant, completely blinded by the glamour of it all. He was Victoria's #1 cheerleader, her handsome accessory. Then the whispers became a roar. A federal investigation was launched. The Securities and Exchange Commission started using words like fraud and Ponzi scheme. It turned out Elysian wasn't revolutionary at all. It was a classic scam, brilliantly packaged for the digital age. Victoria had been using new investors' money to pay off the old ones, all while funneling millions into her own lavish lifestyle. The collapse was breathtakingly fast. One morning, she was on the cover of Forbes. By the afternoon, the FBI was raiding her office, carrying out boxes of evidence. News channels ran her photo next to headlines screaming, "Tech Titan turns out to be Tech Tyrant." I watched it unfold on the 24-hour news cycle, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. I saw footage of Mark caught by the paparazzi as he left their penthouse, his face pale and drawn. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by the hunted look of an animal caught in a trap. Lawsuits piled up. Assets were frozen. The private jet was seized. The empire, which had seemed so impenetrable, had been built on a foundation of lies, and it crumbled into dust overnight. The emotional shift was palpable. The woman who had been the picture of confidence and power was suddenly a pariah. Her friends, the ones who had flocked to her parties and basked in her reflected glory, vanished. The phone calls stopped. The invitations dried up. I saw a photo of her leaving a preliminary court hearing, hunched over, hiding her face from the cameras. She looked small, frightened, and utterly alone. And Mark, watching him was a complex experience. Part of me, the wounded part, felt a surge of grim satisfaction. A nasty little voice in my head whispered, "You got what you deserved." It was pure, unadulterated schadenfreude. He had bet on the winning horse, and it had collapsed mid-race, throwing him into the mud. But another part of me felt a sliver of pity. He looked so lost. He had hitched his wagon to a falling star, and now he was just part of the debris. He had traded our quiet, stable life for a fantasy, and the fantasy had turned into a nightmare. He had chased the glitter and discovered it was just broken glass. I was at home one night, a week after the main scandal broke, finally feeling a sense of peace settling over my house. It was mine again. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was calm. It was raining outside, a steady, soothing rhythm against the windows. And then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door and my heart stopped. It was Mark. But it wasn't the Mark I knew, or even the new, polished Mark from Victoria's world. He was a ghost. His expensive suit was wrinkled and damp from the rain. His hair was a mess. He hadn't shaved in days. His eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. He just stood there on my doorstep, disheveled and broken, with the storm raging behind him. He looked up at me, his lip trembling, and he opened his mouth to speak. The man on my doorstep was a stranger wearing my husband's face. The arrogance was gone, scraped away by humiliation. The easy charm had curdled into a desperate, pleading vulnerability. Rain dripped from the ends of his hair and ran in rivulets down his face, mingling with what I realized were tears. His hand, the one not holding the strap of a worn leather duffel bag, was trembling as he held it out, as if to steady himself against the doorframe. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice a ragged, broken thing. It was barely audible over the sound of the storm. I just stood there, my hand gripping the edge of the door, the wood cool against my knuckles. I was a statue, frozen by a tidal wave of conflicting emotions. Pity, anger, vindication, and a deep, aching sadness for the man he used to be, for the life we used to have. "What do you want, Mark?" I finally asked, my voice colder than I intended. He took a step forward, into the small pool of light from the porch lamp. Can I come in?" I shouldn't have. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to shut the door, to lock it, and to never look back. But the part of me that had loved him for a decade, the part that still remembered the good times, hesitated. Against my better judgment, I stepped back and let him in. He shuffled into the entryway, dripping water onto the hardwood floors he had helped me pick out. He looked around our home, his eyes wide with a kind of pained recognition, as if he was seeing it for the first time after a long, terrible journey. "It's all gone, Sarah," he said, his voice cracking. He dropped his bag with a heavy thud. "Everything, the money, the apartment, it was all a lie." He started talking, the words tumbling out of him in a frantic, disjointed mess. He blamed Victoria, her ambition, her recklessness. He painted himself as a victim, a man swept up in a world he didn't understand, seduced by a fantasy. He was trying to rewrite the narrative, to cast himself as the prodigal husband returning from a terrible mistake, rather than the willing co-pilot of his own destruction. "I was an idiot," he sobbed, finally sinking onto the bottom step of the staircase, burying his face in his hands. Muffled sobs echoed in the quiet hall. "I was so stupid. I threw away the only real thing in my life for what? For nothing, for a lie." He looked up at me, his eyes full of a carefully crafted remorse. "I made a mistake, Sarah, a terrible, life-ruining mistake. But please don't throw away what we had. Don't throw away 10 years of us because of this. She meant nothing. It was the money, the excitement. It wasn't real. You and me, this is real." And that's when it hit me. The moral dilemma laid bare right there on my welcome mat. Here was the man who had shattered my world, begging me to help him pick up the pieces of his. I had 3 choices. I could take him back, letting pity and shared history erase the betrayal. I could destroy him, use this moment of weakness to expose him, to humiliate him as he had humiliated me. Or I could simply walk away, close the door, not just on him, but on that entire chapter of my life. As he sat there, pleading his case, my mind flashed back. It wasn't a choice made in a vacuum. It was weighed down by a decade of memories. I saw our wedding day, him whispering in my ear during our first dance that he was the luckiest man alive. I saw us in our first, tiny apartment, painting the walls a ridiculous shade of yellow and getting more paint on each other than on the walls. I saw him holding my hand in the hospital waiting room when my father was sick, his quiet strength the only thing keeping me from falling apart. These moments were real. They had happened. They were the foundation he had abandoned, and now he was trying to crawl back to it for shelter. He must have seen the conflict in my eyes because he pushed harder. "Just let me stay here, Sarah, just for a little while, until I can get back on my feet. We can work on it. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. I know we can." I held up a hand to stop the torrent of words. My head was spinning. I needed to breathe. I needed to think away from the raw desperation radiating off of him. "Mark, stop," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I can't. Not right now. I need time to think." His face fell. The hope that had flickered in his eyes began to dim. A new kind of panic set in. Time? Sarah, I have nowhere else to go. They took everything. My accounts are frozen because of my association with her. I have nothing. He stood up, taking a step towards me, his hands outstretched. Please don't do this to me. Don't kick me when I'm down. He collapsed into a fresh wave of tears, his shoulders shaking. The ultimatum was unspoken but clear. Help me now, or you're as cruel as they are. I gave him no answer. I just stood there, watching the man I had promised to love in sickness and in health, in good times and in bad, completely and utterly fall apart. And I felt nothing. Just a vast, empty silence where my love for him used to be. Would you forgive someone who left you for greener grass, only to come crawling back when they found out it was AstroTurf? The question wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about self-respect. I didn't let him stay. I gave him the number of a cheap motel down the road and $100 in cash from my emergency stash. It felt like a severance package for a decade of my life. He took it, his face a mask of disbelief and wounded pride, and left. The click of the door closing behind him was one of the most satisfying sounds I had ever heard. The next day, I was a wreck. Not because I missed him, but because his desperation had unsettled me. It had dredged up all the pain I had been carefully packing away. I called in the cavalry. Chloe came over with a bottle of wine, and I got my older sister, Emily, on a video call. The three of us convened in my living room, a council of war. So, the prodigal husband returns, tail between his legs, Chloe said, pouring a generous glass of Pinot Noir for me. What's the plan? Do we slash his tires? Do we send anonymous glitter bombs to his motel? I have ideas. Chloe was my fire. She was ready to burn his world down for what he did to me. Emily, on the other hand, was my ice. She's a lawyer, pragmatic and measured to a fault. Glitter bombs are technically assault, Chloe. Emily said calmly from the laptop screen, Sarah, the first thing you need to do is protect yourself. Legally, financially. He's desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. We talked for hours. I laid out everything. His pleading, his self-pity, the strange mix of satisfaction and disgust I felt watching him crumble. Part of me wants to ruin him, I admitted, the words tasting like poison. I want him to feel even a fraction of the humiliation I felt. I want everyone to know that he wasn't some innocent bystander. He was a willing participant right up until the moment the money dried up. I get it, Chloe said, squeezing my hand. He deserves it. He might, Emily countered, her face serious. But you have to think about what that would cost you. There's an old saying my grandpa used to use. Don't wrestle with pigs. You both get muddy, and the pig likes it. If you get down in the mud with him, you give him power. You make this about him again. Right now, this is about you and your future. Her words hit me hard. She was right. A loud, messy revenge would just keep me tethered to him, trapped in the same toxic dance. I had spent months feeling powerless, like a side character in the drama of his new life. The last thing I wanted was to give him a starring role in my recovery. So we made a plan. It wasn't a plan for revenge, it was a plan for reclamation. My first call was to the best divorce attorney in the city. I told her the whole story, holding nothing back. She was sharp, empathetic, and utterly no-nonsense. Within an hour, she had laid out a clear path forward. My revenge wouldn't be illegal or cruel. It would be a series of quiet, deliberate, and lawful actions designed to restore my agency and protect my peace. It was about setting impenetrable boundaries, reclaiming my home, and telling the truth, but only at the right time and in the right place. The first turning point was a public but measured choice. Mark had been sending desperate texts to our mutual friends, spinning a tale of a terrible misunderstanding and his undying love for me. He was trying to control the narrative, to paint me as the cold, unforgiving wife. So I sent a simple, single email to that same group of friends. It read, "Hi everyone. As many of you know, Mark and I have been going through a difficult time. To avoid any further confusion, I wanted to let you know directly that I have officially filed for separation and will be proceeding with a divorce. This was not a rash decision, and it is final. I wish him the best, but my focus now is on moving forward. I appreciate your support and your respect for my privacy during this time. Best, Sarah." No accusations, no drama, just clean, undeniable fact. It took the power right out of his hands. I wasn't the crazy, emotional wife. I was a woman in control of her own life. The replies that flooded in were all of support. For me. The next step was untangling our lives. I systematically went through every financial account, every utility bill, every subscription service, and severed his name from my life. It was a tedious, painful process, like performing surgery on my own past. Each call was a small act of erasure, a reclaiming of my independence. Then came the bombshell. My lawyer called me a few days after I'd filed the paperwork. Mark had responded, and he wasn't going to make it easy. "Sarah," she said, her tone cautious, "we have his response to the filing. He's contesting it." "On what grounds?" I asked, confused. "He's claiming financial entanglement. Apparently, when he was with Victoria, he co-signed on several of her business loans, large ones. Now that her assets are frozen and she's facing prosecution, the creditors are coming after him. He's claiming that since those loans were taken out while you were still legally married, a portion of that debt is marital property."
He's essentially saying he's so financially ruined that he needs spousal support from you to survive, and that you share responsibility for his catastrophic debt. I felt the blood drain from my face. He wasn't just begging to come back, he was trying to drag me down into the financial grave he had dug for himself. The stakes had just been raised exponentially. This wasn't just about my heart anymore. It was about my future, my home, everything I had worked for. He wasn't just a sad sack on my doorstep. He was a threat. Is quiet dignity better than loud revenge? I had thought so. But now, with him trying to make me pay for his affair, I wasn't so sure. My quiet plan for peace was about to be put to the test. Mark's attempt to chain me to his financial disaster was a declaration of war. My quiet, dignified plan had to evolve. It was still about protecting myself, but now it required a more strategic defense. The ripple effects of his and Victoria's downfall were spreading, and I had to make sure I wasn't swept away by the tide. The consequences for them were landing hard and fast. Victoria's glamorous social circle evaporated overnight. The friends who had once littered her Instagram feed were now publicly distancing themselves from her, issuing statements through their publicists. She was toxic, a social contagion. Mark fared no better. Our mutual friends, having received my calm and factual email, now saw his desperate texts for what they were, a pathetic attempt at manipulation. They rallied around me. I got calls and texts offering help, a home-cooked meal, or just a listening ear. Old friends I hadn't spoken to in years reached out to say they were on my side. The landlord of our building, a kind older man who had known us for years, offered to change the locks for me, free of charge. "You deserve peace in your own home, Sarah," he'd said. These small acts of solidarity were like reinforcements arriving on the battlefield. They were small victories, but they mattered. In contrast, Mark was facing a series of awkward, painful conversations. His parents, who had initially urged me to forgive him, were horrified when they learned the full extent of his financial recklessness and his attempt to drag me into it. They called me to apologize for his behavior. He was becoming an island, completely isolated by the consequences of his own choices. I won't lie. A part of me felt vindicated. Watching him flail was a satisfying, if complicated feeling, but it wasn't the sweet, triumphant feeling I might have imagined. Revenge isn't candy. It doesn't dissolve cleanly on your tongue. It's more complex, with a bitter aftertaste. Every piece of bad news I heard about him was also a reminder of the life we once shared, a reminder of the man I thought I knew. There was a hollowness to the victory, a quiet ache that lingered beneath the surface. The next turning point came when Mark, realizing he was losing the PR battle among our friends, tried to rewrite the story publicly. He posted a long, rambling message on his Facebook page, a platform he hadn't used in years. It was a masterpiece of self-pity, talking about making mistakes, learning lessons, and his hope for reconciliation. He tagged me in the post. He was trying to create a public spectacle, to force my hand, to make me look cruel if I didn't respond with grace and forgiveness. My phone immediately blew up with notifications. Chloe called me, furious. "Are you seeing this? The nerve of this guy! You have to respond. You have to tell everyone what he's really doing." I was tempted. Oh, I was so tempted to unleash the full story in the comments, to expose his lies and his legal threats for all the world to see. But then I remembered Emily's advice. Don't wrestle with the pig. Giving him a spotlight, even a negative one, was still giving him what he wanted. My attention, my energy. So I did something else. I untagged myself from his post. And then I wrote my own separate post on my page. It was simple. It was calm. It was final. It just said, "For anyone wondering about my current situation, please know that I am safe, I am moving forward, and I am surrounded by wonderful support. I will not be engaging in public discussions about my private life. The truth has a way of coming out on its own. I'm focused on the future." I didn't give him a single word. I resisted the urge to engage, to fight, to defend myself in his arena. Instead, I calmly and publicly shut him down, not with anger, but with indifference. I made him irrelevant to my story. The response was overwhelming. My post was flooded with hearts and messages of support. His post, in contrast, was met with a deafening silence. He had tried to create a public trial, and the jury had quietly walked out of the room. That night, feeling a sense of calm I hadn't felt in months, I was scrolling through my LinkedIn messages, deleting old recruitment emails, and that's when I saw it. A message from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line was just one word, Elysian. I clicked it open. The message was from a woman who said she was Victoria's former executive assistant. She wrote that she had been forced out of the company for questioning Victoria's ethics, and that she had documentation, emails, financial records, meeting notes, not only proved Victoria's fraud, but also detailed Mark's deep and willing complicity from the very beginning. He wasn't just a passenger, he was navigating. She finished the message with a chilling line. "She ruined my career. He helped her. I think you have a right to see the proof. He's not the victim he claims to be. Let me know if you want it." My heart hammered in my chest. This was it, the smoking gun, the ammunition I needed to not just win the divorce, but to completely and utterly destroy him. An unexpected ally had just handed me a nuclear bomb, and I had to decide whether or not to push the button. I met Victoria's former assistant, a woman named Clara, for coffee. She was nervous, but resolute. She handed me a flash drive. "It's all in there," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed it across the table. Emails where he's advising Victoria on how to hide assets, spreadsheets he helped create to falsify growth numbers. He knew everything. He wasn't just her boyfriend, he was her willing accomplice. I took the flash drive, the small piece of plastic feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. This was more than just proof of infidelity. This was evidence of potential criminal activity. If I gave this to my lawyer, she could use it to completely dismantle his claim for spousal support. If I leaked it to the press, it would not only ruin any chance he had of rebuilding his career, it could very well land him in serious legal trouble alongside Victoria. The tables haven't just turned. I had the power to flip the entire table over on top of him. The consequences for him were already piling up. He couldn't find a job. His name was now inextricably linked to one of the biggest financial scandals in years. Recruiters who had once hounded him now ignored his calls. His family, ashamed and unwilling to be dragged into his mess, were offering him little more than a couch to sleep on and a lecture. He was in a free fall, and I was holding the only parachute. In a strange twist of fate, my own life was moving in the opposite direction. My boss, impressed with how I had handled the immense personal stress with quiet dignity and professionalism, called me into his office. He offered me a promotion, a new project, more responsibility, a significant pay raise. People admire restraint. They trust someone who can navigate a crisis without losing their head. My integrity, the very quality Mark had mocked as boring and safe, was now my greatest asset. I suddenly had a real choice to make. I was standing at a crossroads. One path was loud, explosive revenge. The other was a quiet, personal victory. The temptation to gloat, to make him suffer as I had suffered, was a primal, screaming urge. I could see the headlines in my mind. I could imagine his look on his face when he realized I was the one who had delivered the final fatal blow. That night, I sat at my laptop, the flash drive plugged in. I opened my email, and I drafted a message to the financial journalist who had broken the Elysian story. I wrote a short, anonymous tip. I attached one of the most damning files from the drive, an email chain where Mark explicitly strategized with Victoria about lying to investors. My finger hovered over the send button. My heart was pounding. This was it, the ultimate checkmate. I thought about him on my doorstep, crying in the rain. I thought about him at the hotel, kissing her without a care in the world. I thought about his condescending tone, his casual cruelty, the way he had tossed our life away like it was nothing. He deserved this. He had earned this. And then I stopped. What would this really give me? A few moments of savage satisfaction? The approval of strangers on the internet? It would also mean my name, my life, my divorce would be forever linked to this sordid public mess. It would keep me tied to him, to her, to all of it. I would become just another character in their cheap drama. I looked around my quiet apartment. I saw the new plant I'd bought, its green leaves unfurling towards the sunlight. I thought about the promotion at work, the supportive texts from Chloe and Emily, the simple pleasure of a peaceful evening with no tension, no lies. I had already started building a new life, a life that had nothing to do with him. Leaking that email felt like taking a sledgehammer to my own new foundation, just for the satisfaction of making sure he was buried in the rubble of his. With a deep breath, I dragged the email draft into the trash. Then, I highlighted every file on the flash drive. I copied them into a secure folder for my lawyer, for defense only, and then I ejected the drive. I had the power to burn his world to the ground, but I realized I was no longer interested in his world. I was busy building my own. My final act wouldn't be a public spectacle. It would be a quiet exit. The final act of our story wasn't a dramatic courtroom showdown or a fiery confrontation. It was a series of quiet, deliberate goodbyes to a life I no longer wanted. Real revenge, I was learning, wasn't about payback. It was about peace. My lawyer used the information from the flash drive not as a weapon, but as a shield. She presented a single, redacted document to Mark's attorney during a preliminary negotiation. She didn't threaten to go to the press. She didn't need to. The message was clear. We know. Drop the claim for spousal support and the nonsense about marital debt, or this gets very, very ugly for your client. He folded immediately. The divorce proceeded, uncontested. He walked away with nothing but the clothes on his back,
and the consequences of his choices. With the legal battle over, I began the physical process of erasing him. I hired a company to haul away the oversized, ridiculously modern couch he had insisted we buy. I sold the expensive watch I had given him for our 5th anniversary and used the money to book a solo trip to the coast. I went through old photo albums, carefully removing every picture of him until all that was left was my story, not ours. The hardest part was a small, worn wooden box where we kept mementos, movie ticket stubs from our first date, a seashell from our honeymoon, a silly caricature of us drawn at a street fair. I held the box for a long time, the weight of 10 years in my hands. Then I walked outside and placed the entire box in the donation bin for a local charity. I didn't burn it. I didn't destroy it. I just let it go. Someone else could have those memories now. They didn't belong to me anymore. That Friday night, after the last of his things were gone and the locks had been changed, Chloe came over. She found me sitting on the floor of the half-empty living room. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. "Lighter," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. We didn't talk about him. Instead, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor making plans. We planned my trip to the coast. We planned a weekend hike. We planned to repaint the living room a color he would have hated. We were designing my future, right there on the hardwood floor. Later, we went to a little dive bar in our neighborhood, a place with cheap beer and a good jukebox. And for the first time in over a year, I laughed. A real deep belly laugh that felt like a release. Revenge looked like a headline. It looked like a public takedown, a triumphant victory. But when I got close to it, it felt hollow. It felt like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. So I took my life back instead. I chose to be the author of my next chapter, and I decided he didn't even get a mention in the acknowledgments. Of course, some people don't know how to read the end of a story. I got a final text message from Mark. It said, "You'll regret this. You'll be lonely and you'll regret throwing this away." I didn't reply. I just blocked his number. I already got what I wanted. So let me ask you one last time. When it's all said and done, would you choose peace or would you choose payback? Look, if you're going through something like this, my story isn't a blueprint. Everyone's situation is different, but the lessons I learned are universal. First, build your own financial independence. It is your greatest shield and your strongest lifeboat. Second, your support system, your friends, your family, they are everything. Don't be afraid to lean on them. And most importantly, know your worth. Set boundaries and enforce them, not just for others, but for yourself. Dignity is a powerful weapon. Don't ever let someone else's crash define your comeback. Your story is yours to write. If you've been through this, tell me what you did down in the comments. Your stories matter, and reading them helps all of us feel a little less alone. Like this video if it helped, subscribe for more stories, and I'll be reading your comments.